Quite often the forgotten supercar name here in the US, Lotus certainly still gets a lot of respect if you mention its name to a bunch of car enthusiasts. I'm taking a look at the 2014 Evora S. This is the company's only vehicle that they sell in the US, and checking out to see if it still follows the Lotus tradition of building lightweight, track-ready sports cars that are very exclusive. So part of owning a supercar has to do with its exclusivity factor. When you're going to shell out this kind of money, you want a vehicle that not everybody else drives. Leave that up to the mainstream. This is a kind of a car that you want people to stare at you in. And with Lotus, the company has been around the States for quite some time now. Actually, the car company has a lot of respect from US buyers. Unfortunately, in the recent years, Lotus hasn't been doing very well. More stringent safety regulations have forced the company to stop selling the well-known Elise and Exige. The Evora, which is kind of their GT car, has been around in the States since 2010. That was the first model year. And it marked a lot of firsts for Lotus. This is a car company that's not known for building vehicles that you can use as a daily driver. If you guys have ever sat in the Elise and the Exige, they're terrible daily drivers. They were basically race cars that were barely street legal. In fact, you can still buy an Elise that's not street legal. It's a track car, basically. Lotus will still sell it to you, you just can't drive it on US public roads. However, the Evora was a lot bigger, a lot more comfortable, and it actually had an interior that was leather bound. It had carpet, which is not something the previous Exige or Elise had. Now, I'm sitting in the 2014 Evora S. This is the only new car that Lotus still sells. There's actually not a 2015 model. For 2016, Lotus says they will be updating this car with more power, an easier ingress and egress in terms of getting it out of the vehicle, and making it meet the new safety regulations that the US is putting forth for all their production vehicles. Now, the Evora comes in basically the base model or the S trim. The S trim gives you a supercharged engine under the hood, which I'll talk about later on in the video. Now, there are no trim levels for this vehicle. You basically choose separate option packages. But in terms of the design, this is definitely a look-at-me sports car. And it looks like it doesn't look like anything else on the road, to be honest. Although there are times where I squint at it and it kind of reminds me of a McLaren. Not a bad car to look like, honestly. But this car kind of has the road presence of a Ferrari, of a Corvette, of a Lamborghini, of an exotic, basically. And people will tend to cross-shop this thing with a Porsche 911, a Corvette, for example, a Nissan GTR. Now, you can tell at the front of the car, it's got the traditional classic sports car design elements here. Very, very beautiful looking headlights. These bi-xenon headlights are standard. Don't expect to find LED daytime running lights. This is an older design vehicle, but nevertheless, it looks sexy and gorgeous from the front end. Looking at the side of the profile of the car, the Evora comes standard with 18 and 19-inch staggered wheels in the back. My tester has the optional gunmetal finish, 19s in the front, 20s in the back. Really fills out the wheel wells. You do, of course, have a staggered wheel at the back because this is a rear-wheel drive lightweight sports car. Now, looking at the rear of the car, you have these beautiful looking circular LED taillights. In fact, the whole car, the headlights, the headlight turn signals, the rear taillights are LEDs just to add that premium look. I really like the center exhaust outlet. It looks great. It also sounds fantastic. I'll get into the test drive and show you that in the moment. Now, the Evora, what makes it such an exotic car and a really well-balanced car is the fact that it's mid-engine. That 3.5-liter V6 sits right behind you, and you hear that engine. When you go through the revs, when you floor that accelerator, it just fills the cabin with a very luscious, sexy-sounding noise. And it definitely follows the traditional suit of Lotus in terms of building cars that are basically track cars. This is a car that will appeal to all of your driving senses, and tech really comes second, and that's okay with me. But for now, let's take a look at the inside and take a look and see how Lotus's flagship supercar does. Now, checking out the interior of this 2014 Lotus Evora, it definitely follows the traditional design elements. It's a very snug, form-fitting cockpit in here. If you guys are fat, excuse my use of words, you're not going to fit well in this car. I mean, I'm 5'7", about 155 pounds, and it's a pretty snug fit even for me. I like the seats on this car. I have the premium package that rolls in these leather seats, the leather buckets, the Recaro seats. They hold you very well. If you guys go for the premium sport pack, it gives you kind of a red accent stitching. Now, getting in this car is definitely the most challenging aspect. You literally cannot just jump into this car. It's going to take you some time. You can see here, this right here is gigantic. It's for the wheel wells, so the front tires intrude there. So getting in the car is a little bit challenging. You kind of have to put your leg in there first. Oh, and then kind of wedge your way in. And of course, this is huge, so you have to nudge your leg getting into here. So if you guys have long legs, getting in this car is not going to be easy. Now, settling into the driver's seat, it's a very nice fit. However, the foot space in here is a little bit cramped. This thing right here takes up space for the driver wheel. So I don't really have a left leg dead pedal right here. So I kind of have to rest my left leg underneath the clutch, which is kind of annoying. But nonetheless, here's the key for the car. It doesn't have push to start, but the key actually reminds me of some older Jaguar keys. So that's interesting. But nonetheless, you stick the key in the ignition here. Now, to start the car, you actually have to push this button here, the Lotus button right here, first to start the car to deactivate the immobilizer system, and then push the clutch in. And then of course, what you're hearing is a 3.5 liter V6 engine that's sourced from a Toyota Camry, or at least it's a Toyota engine, the 2GR FE motor. Of course, Lotus builds it and they tune it, and it sounds fantastic. Put it into sport mode here, it opens up a butterfly valve in the exhaust. Oh my goodness gracious, that is the sexiest sounding V6 I have ever heard, without a doubt. Now shutting the door, the window is automatic down, and down for the driver and the front passenger. Not automatic up though. I kind of wish they just made that standard. Now looking at the rest of this interior, you can tell it's a very nice cabin. I mean, this is not what Lotuses are known for. If you guys have ever sat in an Elise or an Exige, the cabin was terrible. It was just cheap. I mean, this was a lightweight sports or race car basically for the street. And you can see Lotus has completely put the dash in leather stitching. It's basically the entire interior is leather stitch. The ceiling has some suede Alcantara. It's leather stitch on the door panels. Basically right here, wherever your elbow is going to rest, it's all soft touch leather stitch. There's some nice storage right here, surprisingly. I did like that feature. I could put my cell phone there. Now, the steering wheel is very nice as well. It's very heavy, which is good for a car like this. It's flat bottom right here. It has cruise control switches on the wheel. That's part of the tech package. If you guys don't get that tech package, which rolls in the nav system and the USB and XM, you don't get cruise control. But nonetheless, it feels really good in your hands. The shifter here, this is the 6-speed manual. It's actually sourced from a Toyota transmission. It actually comes from a diesel truck, apparently. And it actually has decently long throws, but it has a nice clunky feel. It reminds me of some Honda shifters. I just kind of wish the throws were a little bit shorter. It looks really funny when it's in neutral. It kind of just curves over to the right. It's an interesting design element, but I like the metal shift knob. It feels really good in your hands. Now, looking at the tech of this car, this is not what you buy a Lotus for, but nonetheless, this tech package is $3 grand, so I might as well show it to you. When you push the nav system here, you got kind of an interesting map display. I mean, this is very aftermarket looking, but the map display looks good. It actually has some tablet capabilities where I can pinch and I can tap, I can zoom like that. It doesn't have any voice commands, however, but if you go for their phone here, it does have Bluetooth audio, Bluetooth streaming audio, and Bluetooth hands-free. Going to your audio sources here, you have your XM, AM, FM, Pandora. You have a USB port when you push this button here, or that's actually the lock button. When you push this button here, it opens the glove box, which is tiny. And Lotus says you're not supposed to put anything large in there. The owner's manual doesn't even fit in there. If you put something that's too heavy, this is going to break. So don't do that if you guys actually own this car. You can see there's the USB port. This is really only meant for gloves. That's why they call it a glove box. So don't put anything heavy in there. Some of the ergonomics in here are a little bit of a fail, but this is kind of a hand-built supercar, and they're not supposed to be built for the masses. So you can tell here some of the switches, for example, I can't see these when I'm sitting right here driving the car. I can't see these, so I have to kind of go over here like and turn on my heated seat button like right there, and it only has one level. It points to which seat it's going to. This is for your interior dimmer switch. This is for the trunk. That's for the glove box. Looking over here, your sport mode button is right there. Your fuel release is there. Your stability control off. Some of the switch gear in here comes from Ford. This comes from an old Ford Focus. This turn signal stock, kind of interesting. Some of the window switches, this mirror control right here comes off of an old Ford as well. The climate control, you have a manual single zone here. Some of the knobs, they don't operate with a fluid nature that you would expect. They just feel a little chintzy. The parking brake itself, it doesn't actually go up very high. It just doesn't make a very pleasant sound either. But I mean, this is the way that old supercars were built. They were flawed. And that's the reason why you bought a car like this. They weren't supposed to be perfect. They weren't supposed to be driven every day. But at the same time, it's one of the reasons why Lotus doesn't sell as well. It's just because people don't really want to deal with this anymore. But I have to say, I'll get into the test drive and show you why Lotus is still a wonderful brand and why they need to continue building cars here in the US. Now, if you can believe it, this car is actually a 2+2. You can get this car with the 2+2 like mine, or without the rear seat. And this rear seat is not a rear seat. I mean, honestly, you're really going to be putting somebody that you hate back here, and you can't even lay them down because the car's not very wide. But you can see here, you have to have no legs to sit back here. But hey, at least Lotus gives you a rear seat with seat belts. You could technically put a baby seat back here, but honestly, who would put their child in a supercar like this? Coming in underneath the trunk, this is actually the first time where I'm going to show you guys an engine back here as well as the trunk space. You can see the trunk space is pretty small. Luckily, I was able to fit my some of my camera equipment here, so it's decently deep. Just plan to pack rather lightly. I think it has about 5 cubic feet of space, so it's about half the size you're going to get from a Corvette. Now, looking underneath here, to access the engine, there's a little cover right here that comes right off. I like how it says Lotus Performance right there. This lifts up, and you can see here, this is the mid-mounted Toyota 3.5-liter V6 engine. You can see it's got a nice big supercharger right on top. Actually, big's a relative term because this car only puts out 5.5 pounds of boost. That's barely any boost, to be honest, but the numbers are 345 horsepower and 295 foot-pounds of torque. It goes to the rear wheels, of course. You can get your choice between that 6-speed manual I showed you or a 6-speed automatic. Both are Toyota transmissions. So in terms of reliability, in terms of maintenance, you could technically say I drive a supercar that's built by Toyota, sort of. Nevertheless, this is a very lightweight car. It weighs about 3,100 pounds. Even the supercharger only adds about 100 pounds. And fuel economy is not bad. If you guys are going to go for the non-supercharged version, you're going to get 1928, almost 30 miles to the gallon. The supercharged version drops that to 1726 with the manual transmission, which still isn't bad. Of course, make sure you put premium gas in this thing. But nonetheless, let's get on the road and see how she does. So it's not every day that you get to drive around a car with this much exclusivity factor. And I have to say, I never used to think of Lotus that much when I was dreaming about a supercar. But first time driving this car, I have to say, that's changed my mind. And I really hope, or at least I really look forward to Lotus coming back in the US and giving us a fresh batch of new products, just because I love the design of this car. I love the way it feels. And it's definitely a supercar in the way that it drives and the way that it accelerates. And let me show you just what I mean by that. Even though this is a Toyota V6, it feels nothing like the V6 that you're going to get in a Camry. And I have to say, the Lotus is not a car that's for beginners. This is more of an advanced car in the way it feels, the way it handles. It's a rear-wheel drive, lightweight supercar like this. And it's got enough power to make those rear tires wheel hop and fishtail a little bit. So you guys need to know what you're doing when you really put your foot down in this Lotus Evora, for sure. What's interesting is I've driven a lot of fast cars, but I have to say, this Lotus, for such modest numbers, it feels like one of the top 5 in terms of fast cars. I mean, with only 3,100 pounds of weight to lug around and almost 350 horses, this thing is quick. It'll hit 60, at least Lotus says it'll hit 60 in about 4.3 seconds, which makes it about a half second quicker than the standard Evora, which is a sub 5 second car. I mean, by the numbers, it's behind a lot of supercars costing this much money. They're going to be under 4 seconds, especially like if you guys wanted to get the Corvette Stingray, that is under 4 seconds, just for the standard V8. But I have to say, this car is, in the way it feels, is definitely what makes it feel special, and it feels a lot faster than its numbers would suggest. Now, you don't really want to drive this car with one hand. In fact, you shouldn't be texting or doing anything that would distract you from driving when you drive a Lotus. That's the whole reason why you buy a vehicle like this. And I have to say, it's a pretty high-strung car. It's For Lotus standards, it's not, but for everything else that I've driven, this is a kind of a car that's pretty loud on the inside. I mean, it's a good kind of noise. It's a noise that puts you in tune with the car. It's just a driver's car, and it feels that way at every turn of the wheel, every shift, every hit of or stab of the throttle. And the ride quality is a little bit on the hard side, of course. I mean, I've driven the Elise, and this thing is like a luxury car compared to the Elise, but if you're going to compare it to like a 911 or a Corvette, this is definitely a more track-focused car. And I am curious to see what Lotus does to the Evora for 2016 that updates this car and makes it a little bit more user-friendly for daily driving. I love the supercharger whine when you really put your foot down. It's a very subtle whine, but it just makes you giggle. It makes you smile. And I have to say, handling is this car's strong suit. I'm literally just having a blast here. This is the perfect road for this curvy back road here in the DC area. The car just sticks to the road with these 275/20s in the back. You can get this car to fishtail easily, so be careful when you guys are really going through the corners. I mean, at least the car has stability control to rein in case so you don't crash at least. But the thing about the Evora is it's such a pure driver's car. The steering is one of the best steerings I've ever had the pleasure of turning. This car just puts a huge smile on my face. I mean, I would love to take this thing to the track. That's really where it belongs. As a daily driver, it's probably about 5/10 of the way there, but as a track car, this thing is perfect, honestly. The shifter is also an interesting one. I love the way this metal ball feels in your hands. Of course, it gets cold and hot when you're depending on the climate, but the throws are a little bit longer than I'd like, but it has a very nice mechanical feel. The clutch, on the other hand, takes a little bit of getting used to. It engages a little bit toward the end of the travel, which made it a little bit difficult to drive this car smoothly. Oh boy. This car is very fast, but it's a handful. I've never felt so much wheel hop and wheel spin and fishtailing just from accelerating a little bit hard out of a corner. But I have to say, it's a great feeling. For those of you who aren't used to this kind of a car, it's a little bit of a scary car, so you kind of have to drive it for a little bit, get used to it, feel what its limits are before you really push it. This is heaven, guys, for sure. This is definitely the kind of car you want to throw your passengers out and just attack a twisty road, and you can do it all day long and beat on that Toyota V6, and it just feels really solid. Wow, this is literally driving bliss. This is the kind of car that any enthusiast would salivate over, and it's the reason why Lotus demands a lot of respect here in the US. It just, you drive this car and you won't believe the amount of stairs I get in this thing. I get more stairs in this car than I did in that Stingray Corvette and that Mercedes that I had. I have to say, I'm impressed with this car. I really am. It's flawed, but it's flawed in a good way. Of course, I'm an enthusiast, so I'm kind of forgiving some of the flaws. A lot of normal people will get in this car and think this is a terrible car to drive every day, and it is. The ride quality is too stiff. It's really low to the ground. You can't see out of this thing. I mean, look at the view out of the back. That is a pathetic view out of the back, and all you really see is the engine cover that says Lotus Performance. Of course, the side mirrors are at least a decent size, and you do have to accept the fact that this is a small car, so it's not too bad in terms of its visibility, but just know you want to spend $550 for that backup camera, just so you can see out of the back of this thing. It also gives you the parking sensors when you get the tech package. Now, this car is a pretty expensive car. I mean, this is an exclusive car. It's a supercar. The Evora S starts at about $79,000. It's about $13,000 more than just the regular Evora. My particular tester has this beautiful shade of autumn bronze paint. That's about $2,400 for that premium paint. Personally, I like the color, but I probably would get this car in either red, blue, or white, or even yellow. I probably might get this car in yellow as well. Now, of course, there's a lot of a la carte options. $3,000 gets you the tech package. Another $2,900 gets you the premium package, or you can also spend $3,400 for the premium sport package. This car also has a sport package that's included on the S model. It gives you a sport exhaust, the cross-drilled rotors in the front. I mean, all in, my particular tester is $93,000, and this actually makes it the most expensive car I've reviewed for you guys. And I have to say, it feels like it's $90,000. It's exclusive enough. It gets you stares like it's $90,000. But of course, when you actually get in the car, it's gonna feel old, but that's okay. You know, the Evora was a great supercar when it first came out, but you know, Lotus will be updating the car significantly for 2016, and they do plan on introducing new products in the coming years. I mean, they have a plan to really come back in the US, and I really hope they do, because as a supercar that that has a Lotus badge on it that you're supposed to be able to drive every day, it excels. But when you compare this car to like a Porsche 911, a Chevrolet Corvette, a Nissan GTR, this car is a little bit on the harsher side, but it will outrun all of those in the corners, and that's really the main reason why you would buy a Lotus. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed my overview of this 2014 Lotus Evora S. If you're in the market for for this kind of a car and you're comparing it to a Porsche 911, just remember that when you buy a Lotus, you are buying a car that's much more exclusive. In fact, there's not really any dealerships here in the US. The only local dealer in the DC area here is is Euro Motorcars in downtown Bethesda, Maryland. So if you guys are looking for a Lotus, you're gonna have some troubles, or you might have some issues finding the dealership that'll carry one. But I know Lotus is expanding their dealership network, so if you guys are in the market for one, it's certainly available to you. And I certainly would keep an eye on Lotus in the coming years, because they will be introducing cars that may be worth it on, maybe that you may be able to add back to your drive list. But if you guys are looking for a deal, you know, you might be able to pick up a 14 for a steal, and these things certainly, they do have the presence of a supercar. Anyways, if you guys are looking to see what of the next cars I'm driving, you make sure you follow me on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. But anyways, hope you guys have enjoyed my overview of this 2014 Lotus Evora. I'll catch you all in the next review.